And it takes just that. Cooperation and coordination between all the fire service agencies, federal, state, counties, and cities. Los Angeles is one of the cities which has a great problem of wild land fires in an urban area. Raymond M. Hill, chief engineer and general manager of the Los Angeles Fire Department, gave us some of his ideas about this.
The California fire disaster of 1970 was very similar in many respects to the very famous 1961 Bel Air fire disaster. The fire occurred in brush. The brush exposed many large dwellings. We had Santana wind conditions that were pushing that fire not only through the brush but into the homes. And of course we had the flying brand hazard where pieces of wood shingles and shakes would fly up to a mile and start fires that far away. So the Bel Air fire led to many changes, many improvements in our operation, but along comes 1970 and we lose 105 homes in another similar fire. You know, it's been said many times that here in Southern California we have the fastest burning ground cover in the United States. And it's true, but you really have to see it, watch it burn before you really believe it. It's what we call chaparral, greasewood, mesquite, this sort of thing. The relative humidity gets down to 10, 5, 0. So the fuel for many, many months is very well dried out. And you have two characteristics because of that. One is the fuel is very easy to ignite. So the easier you can ignite it, the faster you're going to burn. Then when you add on top of that the fact that we have Santana winds, these hot, dry winds that blow in off the desert, northeast of us here, and blow in across the Los Angeles basin towards the ocean. And I'm talking now of winds of 50, 60, and 70 miles an hour. You don't get in front of that kind of a fire and stop it because it is not stoppable. You wait until it burns into a light fuel and then you may be able to stop it, or you wait until the wind dies down and then you may be able to get in and stop it. And of course, surrounding the city, we have mountainous terrain which is very difficult to get into and fight fire in. Now, you take these things and put them all together and consider that we have a very strong trend to building in this area. People living in a highly urbanized area still to get to be as suburban or rural as possible. Now, one of the things that's a problem with this, as soon as you bring man into a highly flammable area, you increase the possibility of fires. Most fires are man-caused. So let's clear a large area around the home. But this is diametrically opposed to the reason why he moves there in the first place. And so they want the brush to grow up as close as possible. They don't want planted trees or planted shrubs. They want it to look like wild land. That's what they're after. And then when you add on top of that those times when you have the Santana winds pushing a fire, then you have the additional problem of flying brand. Because many of the roofs in this area are combustible. They're wood shake or wood shingles. And a flying brand can travel a quarter of a mile, a half a mile, a full mile. We had 105 homes within the city completely destroyed. These homes were destroyed in areas that were not within the mountain fire district. So we, at this time, had flying brands moving out of the mountain fire district and landing on homes out in what we call the flatlands as opposed to the steep terrain up in the brush areas. You know, with respect to the wood shingles and the wood shake roofs, of course, the National Fire Protection Association has urged for years that urban communities should outlaw such shingles and shakes. And so we are right at the present time processing an ordinance change, and we've set up what we call a buffer zone that varies in width from a half mile to a mile, and this depends upon the particular terrain and how heavily built up the area is. We are going to require that Class C roofs be put on new construction in this area. Watering the roofs, one of the newsmen brought this out to me during the September 1970 disaster. He said, Chief, do you recommend that the people stay and water down their roofs? And I said yes. If you have an able-bodied man there, let him stay and get the women and children out. The people in the flatlands staying and wetting their roofs down are not going to be trapped by a fire. If you stay up in a canyon where you're not experienced on when you should get out, you could very easily get trapped in there and lose your life. The conditions are different. One of the problems that the fire department has in fires of this type is the congestion of people getting out of the area when they're up in long canyons, and also sightseers wanting to get in and see what's going on. It doesn't really do too much good to get on the radio and television to urge people not to go, because although a lot of people will heed such an admonition, other people hear about it that they hadn't otherwise heard, and you'll still have a large number of people coming in the area. The only real solution is to get police assistance in there immediately so that they can set up the roadblocks and really control the crowds. Certainly, if you look up the records, you will find that large fires in terms of acres burned, in terms of loss of life, in terms of total damage, actually the largest have not occurred in California. Ours are just unique in a couple of ways, in that it's brush, a lot of homes set down in the middle of the brush, and the Santana winds. But that doesn't mean that we have any lock on disasters. They do occur all over. And I think that lessons that we learn here can be utilized by other fire departments. Likewise, things that they learn in fighting their fires are valuable to us, because we can all learn from each other.
Fighting one of these large-scale wildland fires is like fighting a war. Deploying the infantry, moving up the artillery, pushing in the tanks, calling on air support, and it's not easy. Consider for a moment one of California's most prevalent ground covers, scrub oak. It averages about 20 tons per acre and produces the thermal energy of 8,500 BTUs per pound. That's 340 million BTUs per acre. Just 40 acres has the equivalent thermal energy of a 20-kiloton nuclear bomb. It's not easy either to take care of your army. Men get tired after grueling hours on the fire line. Replacements have to be moved in. First aid has to be available. And an army has to be fed. Over one critical weekend in September 1970, in Los Angeles County alone, 4,000 men were involved. Among other things, they consumed 13,000 pounds of meat, 1,200 loaves of bread, and 8,000 pounds of fruit. But there are many who can't queue up in a chow line when fire strikes. Their food and homes are lost. Even those with whom we have made friends become confused. And in spite of all our efforts, some of them are lost. People, too, become confused and frustrated. What to take? What to leave? Where to go? And when the fire is over, how do you evaluate your loss? Materially. Emotionally. Spiritually. In terms of money, the loss is staggering. An estimate of the total loss for the California fire disaster 1970, including public and private structures, property, firefighting, and rehabilitation, amounted to $133 million. The loss of ground cover in watershed areas can only be measured by the erosion that takes place on the denuded hills. When heavy rains come, as they quite often do, the resulting floods create another disaster. Torrents of water and tons of mud. In an attempt to prevent flooding, the burned-over areas are reseeded as soon as possible. In 1970, in Los Angeles County, this was done within 3 weeks after the fires. It required 800,000 pounds of rye grass seeded from the air. Fortunately, a light rain fell right after, which helped the seed germinate. As a result, flood damage was greatly reduced when the heavy rains arrived. So much for 1970. But what's going to happen when fire season rolls around again? Not only in California, but in every other part of the country where the weather is hot, the brush is dry, and the winds are blowing. What can be done to assist all the fire service agencies in their efforts to prevent another disaster? Let's hear again from our 4 fire experts. On the subject of communications, first, Chief Hill.
In a large moving fire or a large situation that does not remain static, you may have to move units around, back and forth, make the most effective use of them, and it is very easy, as I've said before, to lose, and I mean lose, quote, unquote, track of companies, lose track of large groups even.
Until we can come up with some method of identifying our equipment electronically so that it can report back to, say, a computer or some command center and automatically update equipment locations. It is a very difficult problem to control equipment in a fire of this size when you have, in many cases, no communication with them.
Now, actually, what you need is a mobile command post with a completely mobile small computer. A computer that you can feed information into, which will control a display board or status board, which will show you instantaneously the status of your units, the various sectors, and what your situation is.
We need to take a look at recognized command structures which utilize multiple agencies. We have problems of communications between multiple agencies with different radio frequencies.
Also in communications, you do need to put all of the units working at a fire of this size, or even in sectors of fires of this size, on a given fire frequency, and you certainly need a command radio frequency that only the command officers can talk on and which is not cluttered up with a tremendous amount of radio traffic that you have in handling a disaster.
I think the great hope for the future, as far as command and control is concerned, will be for some company, aerospace, or somebody, the technology is available right now, to come up with an equipment identifier.
One of the most effective ways of doing this is to use operations research techniques and computer analysis of firefighting. And we have made a beginning in this research, but there is a long ways to go.
Some important observations were made about firefighting support from aircraft.
On the Malibu fire, as in all the fires, watershed fires in Los Angeles County, we used a combination of fixed wing and helicopters.
Now, water drops from bombers are very useful on some types of fires. On brush fires in very steep terrain, such as we have here in Southern California, this is not really the answer. Actually, a large helicopter will do more good than several large bombers.
Helicopters are very effective. They have pinpoint accuracy, and they can be refueled and returned in a very short time.